Welcome to Smart, Amazing Conversations with Dr. Nancy, a podcast that takes a look at stories of life and leadership for smart, amazing women and men like you.
The way I can give support to the world right now is by showing up. The most important thing is don't think just that you have to bring anything. Bring yourself, show up.
If you are in a position of leadership and a position of management, bring women along with you.
Supporting women is Dr. Nancy's passion and her purpose, and talking with other women and men who promote women's leadership is one of her favorite things to do.
I've yet to meet a woman who did not know what she really wanted. She was just either afraid to ask the questions or she was afraid of what the answers meant.
Their stories connect us and help us understand that the possibilities are endless if we support each other and lift other women up.
Trust is created by persistent identity. I show up in my conversations. I build relationships. I show up as myself time and time and time again. And trust is built. It's one conversation at a time.
Dr. Nicole Haggard is the director of the Center for the Advancement of Women at Mount St. Mary's University. Her scholarly work, consulting, and academic career have been dedicated to promoting equity for women and gender parity. Her research focuses on the intersection of race and gender in American culture. A faculty member in the Film, Media, and Social Justice program at Mount St. Mary's since 2015, Haggard is also the co-founder of the Center for Intersectional Media and Entertainment, an organization dedicated to advancing representation in the entertainment industry. She takes an intersectional approach to advancing culture and brings data to life through storytelling. Haggard has worked with organizations like the Gina Davis Institute on Gender and Media and Lida Hill Philanthropies If Then initiative to amplify their mission of advancing women in underrepresented fields. Now here's Dr. Nancy and her guest, Dr. Nicole Haggard.
Today's about you.
Okay, let's talk about me.
About Dr. Nicole. You've had a wonderful career and you've got a wonderful background and you are delightful. I've truly enjoyed getting to know you, and your energy is so positive and so uplifting. So, the status of women and girls was an amazing event. And I just love Mount St. Mary's University. It fits in perfectly with the mission of Women Connect for Good. So everything you do is just right up for everything that I've always hoped would happen. So you're in the thick of things. So Dr. Nicole,
yes,
you've been everything. Media. You've been an advocate. You're a philanthropic individual. In this race and gender equity. And I also want to talk about the research about your intersectionality because it's so important. And I've got your questions as well. But first of all, how did you get to be the you I'm talking to today?
What a great question. And it's so hard to think about where to even start from that. But when I think about how I got to this place, the thing that really comes up for me is when I was in a dark place trying to finish my dissertation. So I was on this PhD journey, and my dissertation was all about race and gender in Hollywood. But this was before the Me Too, not the Me Too, it was before the Me Too movement, but it was before the Oscars So White movement, right? So now we hear a lot about like why representation is so important in Hollywood. And at that time, people weren't really talking about it. So a lot of the messaging that I would get was, of course, you think that's important, as if it didn't really matter. You'll never be successful doing that, right? Working with kids or working with people who are disadvantaged will never get you anywhere, those kind of messages. And so I was having a hard time finishing, as most people do with a PhD, right? And one of my girlfriends invited me to an event where her boss was winning an award for the work she was doing. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. So I get there, and it was a nun was her boss, actually. And she was getting an award for the work she was doing, bringing kids to visit their parents in jail. And I was just listening to her speech and everything she was talking about, and it just resonated with me. And I went to talk to her after she gave her speech, and I was telling her about my work and what I do and what I'm passionate about. And she put her hand on my arm and she stopped me and she looked me in the eyes and she said, "I like you. You get it." It's something about the way she said that, it was everything for me at that time. That the way I saw the world was actually the most valuable thing about me. The way that I saw so strongly how the media has a profound impact on who we think we are and how we know who other people are and everything we value, how we see women, how we see Black women specifically, right? Like you could break it down in any sort of way. And any social issue, I could bring it back to the media. And that was kind of like my superpower. And so for her to say, God, like there's something special about you because of how you see the world, not because I was smart, not because I was funny, not because I was cute, like all the things society tells girls that they're valuable for, but it was the way I saw the world. And so I think that was really the start of this new journey for me, really. And she told me about a group of women. One of her friends had a house that was called the Discernment House, and she told me to go look it up. And I did, and it was a women's leadership community, and it said, listen to the life that wants to live within you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, that's exactly what I want to do.
Listen to the life that wants to live in you. I like that.
Right?
I like
that.
I love
it. So it turned out it was another nun whose house it was. It was actually two sisters of St. Joseph, Sister Darlene and Sister Carol. And so I moved into the house and I lived with the sisters for a year. And it was one of the most transformative times of my life. And so I think that's really where this journey started for me.
Right. Well, we've talked about this because I worked at Mercy, St. John's.
Right.
I was around nuns all the time because Sister Rock was in charge of the Sisters of Mercy, but she was also in charge of the hospital setting. So she was the CFO. She was at the top of the chain, and these women rocked the place. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They had their stuff together, but it always was that gentle part of them. I mean, they were strong, but then there was that gentle part of which was kind of that yin and yang of being a nun. But yeah, there's a lot to be learned there. And of course, the ultimate commitment that they make and sacrifice that they make, really, as far as the world and really putting themselves out there was definitely something to think about. But so it led you also then into the jobs. I mean, the career that you chose.
Yeah.
And, Mount St. Mary's University is just an amazing place. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And the intersectionality that we've been talking about, and these girls becoming women, are exactly what we're talking about as far as them changing their lives, finding their voice, finding their superpowers, and going out in the world and lifting other women and girls up as well. And that's what you've been doing all along.
Yeah. And I think that, so I was living with the sisters, and Sister Darlene said to me one day, like, do you know about Mount St. Mary's University? And I was like, Mount St. what? And I went to USC. It's literally down the street from Mount St. Mary's, right? And didn't even know about it. She was like, we have a film, media, and social justice program. And I was like, that's everything that I do, right? And I'm like, what? Like, this is crazy. And I knew I was always going to be like a consultant in Hollywood. Like that was my vision, right? That like I would talk to the people working in the industry, get them to see the things we were seeing, right? And change the world. But I had never considered teaching too. And so we went up to the Mount, and I met someone named Bernadette Gonzagas, and it was that same experience that I had with Sister Jabra, right? It was like you get it. And every woman that I met that they introduced me to, it was that same energy of we are on the same playing field here. We're seeing the world the same. We're seeing this vision the same. And what I later came to find out and learning more about, the history of the sisters and how they started as 6 women in the streets of Le Puy. They weren't cloistered. They were actually on the streets. And that's what was new and revolutionary about this group of women that started. So they really wanted to be in the streets during the French Revolution, like responding to the times in which they lived. And so they started working with women who were prostitutes on the street and teaching them how to make lace so that they could be economically independent, right? And start a new life for themselves. And so that energy of what they would call being an uncommon woman in an uncommon time, responding to the times in which you live, is that sort of mantra that lives through all of us. We call it being unstoppable now, right? Like that's the Mount's motto. But that is the vision that I see and a lot of us see working at the Mount. The sisters prophesied that someday you would no longer have to do this work and be a sister, right? They called it associates, they called it the new harvest, like they had a bunch of different words for it, but they prophesized this as well. So for me, I see that there used to be hundreds of women flocking to the mountain that is the Shalon campus in Brentwood, becoming sisters, right? So there was hundreds of women flocking to the mountain to become sisters. Now there's thousands of girls flocking to the mountain to become graduates of Mount St. Mary's University. And it's within that same energy, right? That they're pulled there and that they're educated to be visionary leaders, responding to the times in which we live. And it's a very particular population of uncommon women, right? Uncommon girls. A lot of us we're free from like the definitions of what society says it means to be a woman, right? In the same way that these sisters were free of the church's definition of what it meant to be a nun at that time, right? And so we're moving through the world in a really interesting way. And what's so amazing about the Mount too is like, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary, right? As the only women's university in LA. So that's 100 years of being dedicated to educating women. We're one of the most diverse universities in the nation, right? 88% of our students are women of color. I think it's like 98% of our students are on Pell Grants, which means that their families earn less than $20,000 a year, right? So it's a very particular population of first generation women of color, girls who come from like economically disadvantaged places, but we get nominated time and time again, year after year, by like New York Times and other outlets as being the university that creates economic transformation, economic mobility for these girls. And it's because of this vision of be all you can be, all that women can be, go out into the world, respond to the times that you're living in, and let's go. You know, it's that energy that I think is amazing.
Well, I think I've told you this before. I think this is the absolute partnership that Women Connect for Good and all the organizations and the community that we're all building needs. You're the educational piece, the ultimate educational piece that, that is the partnership, the collaboration that I think is so very important for all of us, because it really is starting as young as possible with girls. Well, the sooner we start with girls, the better. Girls and women. But again, it's that we're all in this together. You know, the status of women and girls for the Mount St. Mary's event was it was phenomenal, because you could tell that room was full of everybody that did get it.
Yes.
The more we talked about, the more we shared each other's, what our passions, our resources, and what we were doing, it just started to flow. And it became more and more. And each person just kept building and building this crescendo of this amazing energy that I think everybody left there just as happy and as high as possible.
Yeah.
Like, there's no doubt about it. And you those change makers, you're one of those people, which is absolutely phenomenal. But okay, so your vision.
Yes.
Your vision is, what is your vision at this point? Because I mean, the change maker, live the life. I mean, I want to remember everything you're saying, but your vision now, what has it changed at all, or has it just continued just to grow?
That's a really great question. Do we change? Are we just growing? Was it always in us in the first place? So I think I've always had, this energy within me. When I first started my career, I was like a revolutionary for representation in Hollywood, right? Like I was a total nerd, but also an advocacy person, right? And so I started doing all of this research on representation, and I would go to all the Women in Hollywood events, right? Every single one, and we'd be talking about the data. And for me, they would say, yeah, there's, women in Hollywood are treated so poorly. We're only, 20% of the industry. You're the only woman in the room. They would give the data. But nobody was talking about, like, what does that feel like to be the only woman in the room, especially the only woman of color in the room, right? Like, what is this experience that you're having? And so I started something called the Women in Hollywood Circles. And so it was kind of like people called it like church for my career, right? But it was that same energy of the report. Like, we're gathering women in a circle. And I believe when women gather in a circle, the world changes, because we're creating that energy of people who get it, right? And so it elevates. And so I started doing that. I was doing the research and the data. And because of that, I got nominated as one of 50 women changing the world in leadership, in media and entertainment, by our friend Gloria Felt, right? Who does the Take the Lead program. So that was her Take the Lead program for women in media and entertainment. So for the way I was bridging academia and advocacy. And so through that, I was like, oh, wow, there's really something here. Like, this is a movement of energy that's happening, and all of these women get it, right? It's that same sort of thing.
That probably was one of the most powerful cohorts that came, because the networking that came from that was phenomenal, because people actually realized you could work together. You didn't have to compete with each other, because the pie, as Gloria says, there's always lots of pieces to the pie. And so that was a phenomenal cohort, and it still is.
Yeah. So speaking of that intersectionality piece too, it really, busts our framework of intersectionality just being about like race and gender and class, right? But it's also about your skills and what you bring to the table and your perspective. And because so many of us came from different areas of the industry, it was the combination of those intersections too that really just set it on fire. So during that cohort, I met Joy Donnell and Monica Lay. Joy is a producer and an author, and Monica, we all know she's going to run a studio someday, right? She's like a powerhouse business person. She was most recently VP of film at MGM, so she's on that track. But together, the three of us came together, and they saw my vision of what I was doing with the women in Hollywood circles, and we formed an organization called See Me. We think that's cute, right? Like see me on screen, but it's the Center for Intersectional Media and Entertainment. And so that's really what ended up like funneling together. We all came together and funneled this work, right? And I'm white, Munica's Asian, Joy's Black. So it's like this really amazing collection of women.
A trifecta.
Yes, it's our trifecta. I love that. Yeah. So, we came together, we started doing more research. We did a big research study with Amazon Films and the Sea Change Institute. During the George Floyd uprisings, we did a series called Hollywood, White Supremacy, and Me. We were working with the Gina Davis Institute, with Light Hill Philanthropies, but everything we were doing was all about how do we educate people on why representation matters, especially the folks working in the industry, and teaching them this hidden history of Hollywood that my whole dissertation was based on. So I was in this very like, let's go energy, but in media and entertainment. Right. And as we started moving through this, of course, the industry was changing. Our biggest intervention was the idea that just because you have more women on screen doesn't mean that you've actually advanced representation. We would hear a lot of the data talking about there were 16 more Latinas on screen this year and celebrating. And we would come in and say, cool. But if they're all still drug dealers' wives and maids, have you actually advanced representation? It's about the human stories. It's about the patterns, right? And I think my ability to see patterns and to be able to tell stories through data, that's where I started from, right? So primed me and prepared me to be the director of the Center for the Advancement of Women, which is what I'm doing today. And the Center for the Advancement of Women really, well, we can talk about that more, but yeah, I think that's really the journey that got me to this position.
So where do you think we are today? Because, we've lost some ground because of Roe versus Wade. We've lost some ground because of the pandemic, and we've lost some ground because of some other political things that are going on. So I think we're playing catch up to a certain degree, but at the same time, I think it's made some of us more determined than ever.
Yes, I think it has.
The time is now. We cannot keep waiting for this election or that to happen. And I think that we have to talk about what our strategies are. And the most important thing that we're talking about, Dr. Nicole, is that we're supporting one another and we're joining forces with one another. And I think our community continues to grow, and our strength and our resources. And as Gloria says, the power too, that we understand how it works, that we can start changing all those things that we're talking about. And bringing our male advocates and bringing everyone together, boys, girls, women, and men together, so that everybody understands where we need to head, because nobody gets anywhere alone. Nobody, not one of us.
No.
So where do you think we are now? Because you've been down that path, and of course, me being a part of Take the Lead too. Now I'm part of the National Women's History Museum, and I just joined the ERA Coalition Board.
Yay!
So now putting them all together with and Mount St. Mary's. I'm just going, let's get them all together. Let's do this. So, so where do you think we are today? And let's talk about where we're going to go. Where we need to go. I know you've got some questions here, but I really think we need to talk about some solutions, some strategies.
Yeah. So let me give your listeners just a little bit of background of how we do it at the Mount. So then it all kind of comes full circle and makes sense.
Absolutely.
So, being the only women's university in LA, we felt drawn to there is no comprehensive data that is telling us what is going on for women and girls in California, right? And we felt like it was our responsibility to provide that data. So our faculty researchers started doing something which we called the report on the status of women and girls in California about 13 years ago. And it started as, this broad overview, and then it really caught fire. People were drawn to it. It started being this report that policymakers and advocacy folks were using to really propel it forward. So I think to answer your question, we can't do anything unless we can measure it too, right? We have to know where we're at to know what change is happening, what isn't happening, what's the proof, right? And I know this so clearly from Hollywood, with my experience in Hollywood, because a movie like Thelma and Louise or Wonder Woman would come out, right? Or Black Panther, right? And they'll be like, oh my God, it's changed forever. And you're like, actually, if you look at the data over the past 20 years, nothing has actually changed, right? So data really speaks truth to power. So we have to be able to measure it to know. And so that's what the report has been the basis for California for a long time. And other folks asked us to start doing reports for them in different counties and women's commissions across California. Then Mayor Garcetti asked us to do a full swath of what's going on in LA, former Mayor Garcetti. And that really propelled the report into this place where they were like, oh, this needs to be a center. There is something happening here, right? And so in 2017, they founded the center. And it was this idea that it would be a hub. And I love that it's the word hub, right? Because that's that connector piece of research, advocacy, and leadership development. So the research is the report and all the data that we do. The advocacy is how are we connecting people and helping people propel the movement forward. And leadership development is really the students and the next generation of women who are taking the charge. And so now that I am the director, the previous director was an academic with a capital A, right? She was so on it, and she made the data so powerful and really laid that forward for how the center does that. Then I become the new director. I'm more of an academic with a lowercase a, but a capital A for advocacy, right? I want to put the data into action. I want us to
and a people person.
Yes, yeah, and a connector, right? And so that's the different energy that's coming out of the center now is, so what now what? What are we doing? And I think everybody feels that energy too. And especially when I came on board, it was this feeling of a little bit of hopelessness. But now it feels like, because we all started talking about the actions we're taking to move it forward, and that we have the report, which is the most comprehensive look at what's going on with women and girls, it gives us, where do we actually need to move? Where do we need to respond to, right? And that's what's really exciting to me. So this year, the thing that we chose to really respond to is something we called the cost of being a woman, right? And so, Claudia Golden won the Nobel Prize for her work on the gender wage gap. And the year before last at our report event, our university president was giving the data on the wage gap, and she paused and she said, I have been reporting this same data for 12 years. This is unacceptable. And that's Dr. Ann McElhaney Johnson talked about, another fierce, powerful leader for women. She's amazing. But something in the way that she said it really struck me. And so when they invited me to be the director of the center, I knew that something about the wage gap and what that meant for the lived experience of women, we had to bring that up to the surface, because we know that you pay us less, but everything costs us more, on both a literal money sense, but also a metaphorical emotional experience sense too, right? How do we bring those things to the surface? So that's really what the report was about this year. And then that's given us the vehicle to move forward for change. And we do have, a very concrete methodology for that, which I can talk more about that too. But the big picture stuff that I see right now is the maternal mortality, right? Not only because how devastating is that, to die or to have something happen to your child, and that it's less safe for women to have children now than it was in the 60s.
And also women of color.
Especially women of color, right? But that also means that now we see the numbers, especially of Black women, right, going down. They're not having babies. So what does that mean for the future of our world if women don't feel safe to have babies, right? So something about the maternal mortality stuff is really pressing on me. The wealth gap and money and all of that, that's really pressing on me. The idea of men, and we can't solve white supremacy without white folks at the table. We cannot solve patriarchy without men at the table. And then girls and the next generation. So these are the 4 things that I'm playing with and that are really important to me right now. And so what we do at the center is we follow the example of the sisters, right? We go out and we look at what's going on. So that's the data, right? The data gives us the look. Then you listen. And this listening piece is really the most important, because you're not listening to the people with all the money. You're not listening to the people you're not listening to those people. You go in the streets,
right,
to the people who are directly impacted by the stuff you care about. And you ask them, and you just sit with them in circles. We call it, we sit in circles and we listen. And that's, very similar to what led Sister Suzanne Jabro to bring kids to visit their parents in jail. When she was doing circles with women in jail, she thought they wanted tampons or more food or, whatever. You bring all of your assumptions to the table. But time and time again, the women said, I want to see my kids. So she figured out a way to make that happen. So that's what we do, right? We go in the streets and we listen, and then you roll your sleeves up and you get to work with a joy of spirit and make sure you are serving the people that you're there to serve. So, yeah.
But again, you have all these girls that are in your programs that families are benefiting. When somebody does well in a family, the family benefits. So what do you hear from their family of these young women and girls? I mean, what do you hear from families as far as how it builds their confidence, their integrity, their self-esteem, and their self-value? How does that work?
That's the best. And that's, what makes me cry. Like, I love going to the events where the girls' families are there. And they thank me so profusely, but I'm like, it's not me, it's them. I just gave them permission, right? I just told them there is no right or wrong answer. The answer is you using your voice. You have the closest proximity. Your perspective is your magic. Your life experience is your magic, because you have all the answers. And so it's bringing that out in them and helping them feel strong to not just assimilate, to not say the things that they think they're supposed to say, but to say the truth that's living within them, and to feel confident and comfortable doing that. And then for me to be able to bring them with these other organizations who are doing the work, and they'll say something in a meeting, and the people at that organization will be like, oh my God, that's an amazing idea, right? It just like resonates with them. So it's giving them access and proximity to power for them to see that they are the missing link, and that their vision is their magic, right? And that life experience that probably a lot of people have told them is the thing that's not going to make them successful is the exact thing that is going to make them successful. And that was the thing that Sister J-Bro did for me, right? I like you, you get it.
Yeah. Well, and I've said this 1,000 times, we can't be what we can't see,
yes.
what we can't hear about, and what we can't read about. And that's true of anybody. We have, let's face it, our role models are extremely important, and we find those. And I think what's also good about your program and what you all do is you lift as you rise. Mm-hmm. Everybody's always lifting one another. And that doesn't happen in other sectors.
Yeah.
Women can be extremely competitive with white women, and we know that. That's where Women Connect for Good came from, was women's other women. But again, the competition needs to go out the window, and that we lift one another as we rise. And if every woman did that, or every man did that for a person, we would have no problems. We would all be eating at the same table, eating the same food, being happy and living good lives.
Yes.
And then that's what you want, and that's what I want.
Yeah.
So, I'm very excited about what you're doing. And again, the relationship that we continue to have is very, very important to me.
Yeah.
So the center is doing wonderful work. Is there any new program that's coming out right now that you'd like to share?
Yeah. So I want to, to your point of like, what does this actually look like in action? I just wanted to give, your listeners a couple examples. And it is that gift of intersectionality that the Take the Lead program gave me was seeing how people from seemingly completely different industries who were experiencing the same issues could come together, even though they probably never would have imagined coming together, right? Like, why would a cinematographer talk to an academic? You know what I mean? That's like a film studies person. But when we came together, it was powerful. So, speaking of this like maternal mortality stuff, right? And we have a lot of nursing. We have a really amazing nursing program at Mount St. Mary's, one of the best in the nation. And so this idea of nursing and how do you serve women where they're needed most, right, was really important to our students and to our faculty members. So we'd been reporting on the maternal mortality crisis in the report. And then we are a university partner with the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, which gives the policy recommendations for gender to the governor. And so all of these forces working together ultimately got, and amazing politicians and advocacy folks, got the Momnibus Act passed in California.
What was it called again?
It's called the Momnibus Act. And it's like the first comprehensive, legislation to really do something about this crisis. And so one of the things that came out of this was that Medi-Cal would pay for doulas. And one of our alums told me about it, right? I didn't even know about it. So she tells me about it. And then she connects me to all the women doing birth work in LA, right? And so I start meeting with each of them individually. So this is like gathering and listening. And everybody keeps saying, Stevie Moreno, Stevie, you have to meet with Stevie. And I'm like, okay, listening to the life that wants to live within you. So Stevie has this organization called Birth Workers of Color Collective, and she has trained so many doulas, and a lot of the women who I was talking to had been trained by her. So I start meeting with Stevie. She's telling me what all the work they're doing. Their collective trains women to be Medi-Cal certified doulas, but these are women who speak multiple languages, many of which are queer. They're women of color, right? So they're coming from the communities that are most impacted by the maternal mortality crisis to really serve them and sit with them. So Stevie and I are like, okay, we got to do something together. I don't know what it's going to be, but we're going to do something together, right? Then the Mount sends me on this adventure with a bunch of other folks to go to Homeboy Industries so we can like talk to Homeboy Industries and find out what they're doing and ways we could partner. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, the homegirls could be doulas. Right? And so why don't we bring birth workers of color with the homegirls and train the homegirls to be doulas? What a population that needs that, right? And how much healing there is for these folks to do doula work as well. And so that has been like developing, and in June, Birth Workers of Color and the Center for the Advancement are going to the Homeboys Day of Wellness, right? So that's like an example of we see the problem. Another thing that we're hearing from a lot of the girls is this, and my students tell me this all the time in the classroom, like, I feel so empowered and valuable here. And then I go home and I'm faced with so much misogyny, you know, a lot of machismo, because the majority of our girls are Latino, right? And what they're expected to do at home. And like everything you're telling me is so counter to my experience in my home life, right? And what I'm experiencing here and that back and forth. So I was like, okay, what do we do about that? How do we fix that problem for girls that we're telling you can be unstoppable, but in their lived experience, they're not getting that message.
In their culture.
Yeah, in our culture as well. And so I started talking to the folks at A Call to Men, right? And so now, which they do amazing, they call it the man box. How do you get out of the man box, right? And they do stuff like for the NFL and the NBA, and they're just like this really great organization. And so now we're talking to them about what would it look like for girls' organizations, for girls' schools to invite their fathers, the men in life, their partners to participate in A Call to Men training, right? So it's really like, what are the needs? What are they telling us they need? And then how do we come up with creative solutions to bring them together? Because we're the hub, right? And we're the connector. So there's just so many things like that that I'm really excited about that we get.
Men have as equally the same issues that women have.
Oh yeah.
They have to be strong and powerful. Women have to be pretty, thin, and beautiful and nice. I mean, so we've all grown up with certain quote unquote things that we're supposed to be.
Yes.
And those are all the things that we need to change. So that's I love that. I love that.
And there's so many more too, right? But that's the gift of us being connectors, right? So we have our key partners, right? Which would be like the National Women's History Museum, the ERA Coalition, the Girl Scouts, right? The California Commission, Representation Project, all these really big folks. And then all of these other community-based organizations that are doing incredible work. And so my privilege is that I get to meet with all of these community-based organizations, but also be in the room with all of the big, powerful organizations and then figure out ways that their work circulates and comes together. And how are we all doing this together instead of fighting for limited resources?
Sharing the resources.
Yeah.
And it's much more fun. It's so
yes.
Well, I know we could talk about this forever. And because I know that this conversation is going to go on, and I'm going to see you at events. And Take the Lead's 10-year anniversary is this in August is in New York.
Wow.
Not New York, Washington, D.C. And we're going to bring together several collaborative organizations. Mount St. Mary should be there.
Yes, I would love to be there. Yeah.
So I'm going to connect you with Gloria. She's trying to get Dolly Parton to come. She's a big country western fan. And 9 to 5, they're going to show this week. Are you going to be at the 9 to 5?
Yes, yeah, we're partners in that too.
I will see you there. But some great things are going on, and it's fun stuff. It's fun stuff.
Yeah, it always has to be fun.
It really does. Yeah. But the benefits are so valuable, and we've got some really good things to look for. And right now, we need more hope and more care and support for one another and with each other.
Yeah.
Ever.
Same to your horses. It's healing for our nervous system. It does something for us on the inside when we're in these rooms, when we're in these circles, when we're having these uplifting conversations. It really is healing for us as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what final words of wisdom would you like to share, and how can people learn more about the center and learn more about what Mount St. Mary's is doing for the world? For the world. So please go and read the report. You can read the report at msmu.edu/the report. It's all of my brain, and I think it's fun and interesting to read. So that's, the first step. You can do that. And then our next report event, this is a Dr. Nancy exclusive. Yes, we have a date. It's going to be Friday, March 28th in 2025. Ooh, so set your calendars. Right now.
Yes.
I wouldn't miss that for the world.
Plan to be in LA next March for Women's History Month. It'll be like the grand finale of Women's History Month. And you will be able to meet the most amazing people you've ever met. Yes. Yeah. That's the truth, the whole truth. Yeah. And my ask is really, if the idea of coming up with bold solutions for solving gender inequity is your lane, if you feel drawn to the idea of being an uncommon woman in an uncommon time, responding to the times in which we live, please contact me. Let me know what you're doing, right? We need allies, individuals, and organizations, right? Like, we come and talk to people, we come do corporate lunch and learns. Like, we are here to really to inspire and uplift and set folks into action for whatever that looks like in your world, right? And because that's what I tell folks, when you read the report, pay attention to what resonates with you. What gives you the tingles? What aspect of it is it? And that's your clue, right? For what lane you should take and what you're getting fired up about. Because we all need to do our individual thing collectively to come together. Yeah. So yeah, please, thank you, all of you, for doing the work and for being part of this movement.
One of the important things that you're saying right now is you need to ask.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
Yes.
Ask and support. Ask for help and ask for guidance. And when we do that, anything is possible. Anything.
Yeah.
And you're that kind of person. Anything is possible.
Anything is possible. You got ideas? Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
Well, as always, I always enjoy talking to you, Dr. Nicole.
Thank you, Dr. Nancy.
So we will be in touch for the next. I'll see you in LA.
Yes, love it. Next week.
Have a wonderful day. It's been very enjoyable.
I'll talk to you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. If you enjoy these smart, amazing conversations, please subscribe, rate, and review them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And read and enjoy more amazing stories in my books, In This Together, How Successful Women Support Each Other in Work and Life, and Leading Women, 20 Influential Women Share Their Secrets to Leadership, Business, and Life. Thank you for listening.